Appearance on Dion's Daily Dose does not imply endorsement from or by any candidate or guest. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Dion Bergeron or Dion's Daily Dose are his own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any guest. Material and information presented is for general information purposes only. The Dion's Daily Dose name in all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owners, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Dion's Daily Dose presents Face to Face with Dion and Shawn. I'm Dion.
And I'm Shawn.
Today we have an interesting story for you. Interesting and terrifying at the same time. One of the things that I've noticed is since the Ukraine conflict specifically, there was a push before this, but especially since the Ukraine conflict, there have been many Russian publications that we used to see all over the place and not so much anymore. RT is one of them. And people can say whatever they want about RT. It's, state-sponsored media. It's paid for by the Russians. It's whatever. But it provides a different perspective.
Exactly.
And I always appreciate that because I like to hear from a variety of different sources. Just like I will occasionally tune in to like Times of India or there's one in particular, like WION or something like that I see on YouTube. There's a variety of foreign
state media.
Yeah, foreign state medias that present what I consider to be very, very interesting information that our media doesn't share with us.
Press TV does that too. Iran state media is interesting too.
There you go. Al Jazeera. There are quite a few that I think provide a good alternative view of things, especially for people that live outside of our borders. This is one example of that. So this is from RT, and the title should be enough to give you pause. The title, Dmitry Suslov. It's time for Russia to think about a demonstrative nuclear test.
Yikes.
Think about that. Followed by, the U.S.-led bloc has lost its fear of the mushroom cloud, but seeing one would perhaps focus some minds. Here it is right here for you. It's by Dmitry Suslov. Who is Dmitry Suslov? Member of the Russian Council on Foreign and Defense Policy, Deputy Director of World Economy and International Politics at Moscow's Higher School of Economics, and Valdai Club expert.
And the Kremlin seems to listen to him.
And the Kremlin seems to listen. Yes, he has the Kremlin's ear, which in and of itself, those two things together should open some eyes and should really make people think, There's a file photo of some missiles on some launchers. The article. There's every indication that the U.S. and several of its allies may soon allow Ukraine to use Western weapons, including long-range missiles, to attack targets located within, how do we put this, Russia's internationally recognized borders, or those that existed before the 2014 Maidan in Kyiv. Maidan? Maiden? I don't know.
I think Maiden.
I'm not sure. In America, as the New York Times recently reported, backers of the idea include Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, most Republicans in Congress, including the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and many members of the foreign policy establishment, including Victoria Nuland, who recently resigned as Deputy Secretary of State. In Europe, Poland, the Baltic states, Germany's main opposition party, the CDU/CSU, and some Western European figures, including the head of the UK Foreign Office, David Cameron, are agitating for the measure. Now, what that all means, reduced to a very, very simple couple of sentences, is the United States is pushing to give Ukraine missiles that they can use to then shoot into mainland Russia. Not only is the U.S. pushing for this, along with many of the talking heads there, Secretary of State Blinken, most Republicans in Congress, a whole lot of people, but also foreign leaders of Poland, Baltic states. Too many people are in favor of this. Continuing on with the article. Recently, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg made a similar appeal, but he would not have made such statements if the issue had not already been considered on a practical level and had not received substantial support from Washington. It has already come to the point where the topic has been discussed at the level of the heads of defense ministries of EU member states. That's a really big deal, ladies and gentlemen. A really big deal when the heads of defense ministries are talking about something, especially something like this. You might as well consider it a done deal. Such a decision would take the conflict to a fundamentally different level, would mean the erasure of one of the brightest, quote, red lines, end quote, that has existed since February 24, 2022, and signal the direct entry of the U.S. and its NATO bloc into the war against Russia. Indeed, the strikes would be carried out on the basis of coordinates provided by Western intelligence systems. The decisions on these strikes would be taken by Western military officers, in parentheses. The media has repeatedly relayed confessions from Ukrainian military officers that every case of Western missile use is coordinated in advance by Western military advisors, in parentheses. And even the button would probably be pressed directly by Western military officers. It is no coincidence that German Chancellor Olaf Scholz justifies his reluctance to transfer Taurus missiles on the grounds that they would have to be operated by German, not Ukrainian, military personnel. This is why denying Kyiv such a right was the main condition for providing it with military aid and one of the main principles of Western involvement in the conflict from the very beginning. There are at least two reasons why the West is now discussing abandoning this principle. The first and main one is the increasingly difficult position of the Ukrainian army on the battlefield. Don't forget that NATO leaders have been saying throughout that the outcome is of existential importance, not only for Ukraine, but also for themselves, as it will determine the nature of the new world order. In other words, the West itself has given the Ukrainian conflict the status of a world war, and therefore Kyiv's defeat will mean its own strategic defeat, the final collapse of the Western-centered international order. Accordingly, the worse the situation for Kyiv at the front, the greater the risks of escalation that the West is willing to take. I'm going to pause there just a moment with the article because I'm finding very, very little in this that I think is flat out wrong.
Question is, how do we put the genie back in the bottle without having a world war is the question. I just kept thinking, and I don't know if there is a way.
I don't know if there is either. Unfortunately, Resident Ice Cream has consistently and repeatedly tied us to Ukraine, both funding and, I mean, they all but bowed down to comedian actor Zelensky when he went to Congress. For God's sake, we had people on the floor of the United States Congress flying Ukrainian flags, flying the flags of a foreign nation. I don't care, ally, enemy, I don't give a damn. Treason, as far as I'm concerned.
It should never have happened.
That should never have happened.
It'll be interesting. There's a meeting that's supposed to happen next month in Switzerland between Russia and Ukraine. So it'll be interesting to see if anything comes from that.
It will be interesting. Let's finish the article because
I
think there's a lot to discuss here. Like, I really do. Back to the article. The second reason is Russia's unwillingness to escalate relations with the West each time it crossed a red line and became more involved in the conflict. And then in parentheses, supplying Kyiv with tanks. Did that. Aircraft, and eventually long-range missiles, in parentheses. Yeah, all of this stuff the West did, and Russia, and these are my words, every single time Russia's like, yeah, we really don't want to go to war with the U.S. and Western forces, which is why they're doing this in the first place, because Ukraine wanted to join NATO and was being pushed into joining NATO. I read a very, very interesting post a little while back. I'll have to see if I can find it, but essentially it breaks down exactly why this was Russia's only option.
I've heard that.
It really, really was. It actually harkens back to Japan in World War II with the embargo on oil and gas that they weren't able to fuel, and they had to attack the United States. They were forced into it by Roosevelt. And so, interestingly enough, that was predicted as well. It was said, you keep doing this, they're going to have to do this. And
which we're kind of doing with Russia now.
Yeah. Back to the article. As a result, the fear of escalation, which was relatively high at the beginning of the military operation, has gradually diminished, as Western publications have repeatedly pointed out. Yes, they keep telling us, pausing the article for a moment, they keep telling us that, Russia's not going to attack us. Russia's not going to escalate. Russia's not going to do this. There's not going to be an escalation. We just need to pour more money into Ukraine so that we can stop Russia. Stop Putin's war of aggression. That's what they call it. Back to the article. Thus, the West has come to believe that the cost of Kyiv's defeat is far greater than the risks of a direct military confrontation with Russia, as a result of allowing Western weapons to strike deep into its old territory. The voices of those who argue that even this time Moscow will not inflict direct military damage on Western countries are growing louder. This logic can inevitably lead to World War III. And if the West's further involvement in the conflict in Ukraine is not stopped now, a full-scale hot war between Russia and NATO will become inevitable. Moreover, due to the superiority of the U.S. and its 31 NATO members in the field of conventional weapons, this war will inevitably move to the nuclear level.
Yikes.
That is a terrifying paragraph there, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely chilling. This is someone who has the ear of the Kremlin telling us, keep up your bullshit, and we're going to have to use nukes. That's really what it comes down to. The article, in a few months, or maybe even weeks, the same logic will be applied to stationing regular Western troops in Ukraine and then starting to shoot down Russian missiles over it. The Kyiv regime has been making these proposals more and more insistently of late. Weren't we told no boots on the ground? And all we had to do was keep giving them billions so that we wouldn't have to send our sons and daughters to fight, right?
That's what they said.
That's what they said. Back to the article. According to even the current Russian nuclear doctrine, certainly a peacetime doctrine in need of tightening, such a scenario would amount to official grounds for the use of nuclear weapons. Yikes. There is only one way to prevent such a catastrophic development of events: a sharp increase in Moscow's policy of deterrence and intimidation. The option of freezing military operations along the current line of demarcation without any political conditions for Kyiv and modalities for its security relations with the West is completely unacceptable. And I'm going to pause there for a moment because I don't know if the U.S. and allies don't realize that, or they're just refuse to see it, because Putin has said on more than one occasion anything less than basically Russia being allowed to keep what it has conquered is unacceptable. He's made that very, very clear. Which does not bode well when Resident Ice Cream and his cronies continually talk about, we got to fund Ukraine. We got to send them more money, send them more money, send them more money.
And they sent more money last week.
Yeah. Back to the article. Some political forces in the West are increasingly advocating this and threatening escalation in the event of our refusal. But this option is categorically undesirable for us because it means even greater militarization of what's left of Ukraine and its even closer military integration with the West. This would herald the emergence of an even bigger threat on Russia's borders than existed before 2022. And that's what people, I think, fail to realize. I'm pausing for a moment. I think they fail to realize how fundamental this is to Russia. This would be like Mexico or Canada joining an alliance with China, who the entirety of the alliance sees the U.S. as an enemy. That's what NATO was all about. It's what they were designed around, was seeing the Soviet Union and the, quote, Western Bloc, which doesn't really exist anymore, as an enemy. Back to the article. Instead, we should first tell the U.S. and NATO roughly what Moscow already told London after David Cameron's words about Ukraine's right to strike anywhere with British Storm Shadow missiles. Namely, that in the event of an attack on old Russian territory, Moscow reserves the right to strike any facilities of the country's concern, including the United States, anywhere in the world. There are many American military bases dotted around the globe. Wow. I want to stop there for a moment because I think it's really important to understand exactly what he's saying. If they continue, if they shoot missiles at, quote, old Russian territory, at Russia, besides the new land that they took over from Ukraine, they are advising Putin that that is basically an act of war by a foreign nation, and therefore he can strike these countries and any of their facilities, including military bases.
Yikes.
Yikes is right. Yikes is right. What if they launch some missiles and it goes into Moscow and Putin says, you know what, I'm done with this, and decides to hit Chicago or LA or New York
or Washington.
Exactly. Secondly, it is important, this is back to the article. Secondly, it is important to officially declare that if the US NATO launches a non-nuclear strike on Russian territory in response to such a Russian strike, Moscow may in turn use nuclear weapons in full accordance with the fundamentals of Russian state policy in the field of nuclear deterrence. Thirdly, since there has been talk of possible attacks not only on British but also on American facilities and of a possible direct military response from the US, it would be desirable to hold exercises on the use of strategic nuclear forces in addition to the current exercises on the use of tactical weapons. Okay, I'm going to pause just a moment because just in case, we're going to go for what's strategic and what's tactical. The difference between strategy and tactics, right? Tactical nuclear weapons are very, very low yield, small nukes that are designed to basically take out a concentration of troops. A strategic nuclear weapon is Hiroshima times 500, Nagasaki times whatever they're up to nowadays. Crazy, crazy levels. And back to the article. Finally, to confirm the seriousness of Russia's intentions and to convince our adversaries of Moscow's willingness to escalate, it is worth considering a demonstration, i.e., non-aggressive nuclear explosion. The political and psychological effect of an atomic mushroom cloud broadcast live on all the world's television channels will hopefully bring back to Western politicians the one thing that prevented wars between the great powers after 1945, and which they have now largely lost: the fear of nuclear war. That is the end of the article. And one word, yikes.
And I wish that Trump was in the White House.
Say it again for the people in the back.
All right.
Because there's no way any of this would be happening if DJT was president right now. No way in hell. Instead of resident ice cream, dude, like, it would not be happening. This wouldn't happen at all. So yeah, it is.
It's frightening.
It is frightening. It is frightening. I remember, right, in the 80s, there's a reason we had so many nuclear movies, right? Movies where the world ended, Fallout games, The Wasteland. I mean, there's countless apocalypse, Mad Max. I mean, there's countless.
The Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, was the Day After Tomorrow? I thought was a virus.
Was it? Okay.
Maybe
I could be wrong.
No, I'm thinking of a different. I think I'm thinking of a different movie. I'm thinking of like 30 Days Later or whatever. I'm thinking of that British movie with the zombies.
Because it's been many years since I've watched that movie.
Yeah,
so.
But either way, there were countless nuclear. I mean, constantly we were told, the movie War Games, like countless movies, countless TV shows, games. It was everywhere. Why? Because we were very, very close to nuclear war with Russia. And in several instances, it was only the quick thinking of a handful of individuals, and at times a single individual, that stopped full-scale nuclear annihilation, not just for Russia, not just for the United States, not just for both, but the whole world, really, because the U.S. has missiles all over the place. In the 80s, before the destruction of the Soviet bloc and the USSR became the Russian Federation, there were missiles all over Eastern Europe,
And some of those missiles are missing. now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting how that works, huh? So we have a situation where we see a top advisor to Vladimir Putin talking about detonating a nuclear weapon to remind the Western powers that A, Russia has them, and B, you guys might want to think twice before you keep doing what you're doing. I would, if I was in an advisor's position, you guys should already know what I think. Ukraine's not the United States. We need to get the hell out of there. We need to get the hell out of, and I want my money back.
Yeah.
I want my money back. It's just all there is to it. Give
Or
me
at
my
least
money.
have an audit.
Right, at minimum, bare ass minimum. Yeah, it's a scary time. We'll see what happens. You know, keep your eyes on the prize, and it's going to be an interesting few months.
It is.
So, thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate it as always, and I hope that you have a wonderful evening. We'll see you again very, very soon. God bless you. God bless Indiana. And God bless the United States of America.
If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose. This has been Dion's Daily Dose, hosted by Dion Bergeron. Executive producers, Shawn Holmgren and Michael Beebe. Copyright 2024. Dion's Daily Dose.